Brother Lovejoy, you there? Peace, Brother Lovejoy. How are you? Can you hear me, Brother Lovejoy? Unmute your mic. I see your picture. I don't see you, but I see a picture, and I see your microphone is muted. It's recording now. I'm going to pause it because I can't see you or hear you. All right. So for everyone that's going to be watching this is another addition to the series that I'm doing. It's called Islamic Orders of Hip Hop, where we're going to be discussing the impact of hip hop on impact of Islam and Western iterations of Islam on hip hop culture. This particular interview is really significant to me. Brother Lovejoy, we used to work together at Simpson Waverly School. I always saw you as a brother who was very disciplined and very respectful, and you also got your respect. And we know that sometimes working with them kids could be challenging because of the issues they were going through, but somehow you always maintained your composure. You always earned their respect. And also, on a personal note, you helped me. You probably don't even remember this, but you helped me because when I first started my business where I wanted to teach meditation, the first place I gave a lecture about meditation and spirituality, you blessed me. You let me come to Mos 14 in Hartford, Connecticut. And that was the very first
Yes.
lecture. When I started, that was my very first lecture. And it was such an honor to be there and speak. It was such a beautiful experience being there amongst the brothers and sisters. And you always treated me with so much, such a welcoming nature, and always was there to lend a hand. I always was there to lend positive energy and information. So I appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Brother, I can hear you loud and clear. I can't see you. Is that
And you can't see me.
normal? No,
I,
sir.
I'm not sure. My video is on, and I see myself on the screen. I'm not sure why it's doing
Okay.
that.
All right. Well, I can hear
Okay,
you loud and clear.
okay, yeah, that is strange though. That is strange. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I've got a couple of questions here, and then as the conversation flows, I probably won't even be looking at the questions. We'll probably just be talking in the building. And the first thing I wanted to ask you
Okay.
was we're talking about the Islamic orders of hip hop, and that term Islam means different things in some ways to different people. I know that there is what they call Orthodox or Eastern Islam, but over here in the West, we have our own iteration of it, our own ideas about it, our own interpretation of it. But I wanted to ask you exactly what is Islam and what is the central concept that's tying all of these different ideas and interpretations together?
As we have been taught, and first, I want to say thank you, brother, for the opportunity to be on this evening. Um, and I really appreciate the work that you do in our community in helping our people to find peace through meditation and mindfulness. And what I will say as a very practical definition for Islam, as we have been taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, it simply means peace, brother.
Mm-hmm.
It is more than just a religion. Although most folks might understand it through religion, it is really a way of life. And so Islam simply means peace.
Okay, gotcha. And you say that Islam is a way of life. What is a part of that way of life that's going to bring peace?
Well, as one who practices Islam, you find peace through submission to the will of God. And one who submits his or her will to do the will of God is then described as a Muslim. And so um, all Muslims all over the world, no matter where they are, what part of the planet, they're practicing those five pillars of Islam. And so, you know, prayer, fasting, charity, belief in the one God, and the scriptures that come from the one God, and then making Hajj are all part of those pillars. And so, no matter where a Muslim, he or she finds themselves, when they declare that there is no God but Allah, that pretty much makes us brothers and sisters under the faith.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the term Islam, there's a lot of different interpretations of what Islam is or understandings of what Islam is. What makes the understanding or interpretation of the Nation of Islam unique?
That's a loaded question, brother. I need the 4 hour plus for that, but to give,
Right.
if you will, the short version, many people are familiar with the Nation of Islam through some of our great students under the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But to go back and study our origins, we have to go to the root, and that would be Master Fard Muhammad, who came in 1930 and raised the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad as the first begotten of the dead. And that put us on our path of, of resurrection here in the hells of North America. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad raised the Nation of Islam for the black man and woman here in America and across the world. It's on the second page of each of our Final Call newspapers that this is a message that is dedicated to the rise and resurrection of the black man and woman here in America, but across the world as well. And so many people, again, they know us through Malcolm X, they know us through Muhammad Ali, and these great ones who were students under the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But today, in 2023, we would not have any of this if it were not for the chief student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who is in our midst today, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And most times we have to reference um, 1995 and the Million Man March.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the nation, we talk about Minister Farrakhan, because unfortunately, many of our young people today are not familiar with the minister, and mainstream media has, if you will, launched an all out campaign to try to keep our young ones from knowing who the minister is today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I remember when I was a young kid, you would see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on television, and then it just stopped. It's almost like word went out, like we got to stop putting him on TV because he embarrassing us too much. He was, I mean, we all remember that Mike Wallace interview where he shut him down and he said, "I think you need to be quiet."
That's right.
They ain't never seen no black man speak like that.
That's true. That's true. Not since.
Yeah, and
um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that you hit the nail on the head, brother. That somewhere in some back room, in some high level, they definitely have conspired to make sure that the voice of truth, the voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, is not heard. But
Mm,
that doesn't stop us, brother.
yeah,
Not one bit.
yeah, exactly. I've been studying a little bit about the Nation of Islam for a while. One of the things that I really love, I studied the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the minister. I always speaks to him with so much love. But he also, even though he loved him, he also let it be known that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a very strict teacher. He was very strict and he offered tutelage. What was the tutelage that the Nation of Islam and Islam in general put in hip hop music, and how did people benefit from hearing that?
What I would say is a loaded question as well, brother.
Mm-hmm.
As I think back to my own history, I first remember hip hop probably in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
The Message, right, by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Mm-hmm.
and it was a conscious message, right? And so if you think about, hip hop as a baby or as an infant even, right, coming out of the disco era, right, coming out of the conscious 60s,
Mm-hmm.
here you had Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, that song the message. And during the time of the Black Power movement, we had the messenger, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
But those words that opened up that song, it said, a child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. God is smiling on you, but he's frowning too, because only God knows what you'll go through. And of course, the chorus said, don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
Right, right.
Well, you know, that consciousness was the residual consciousness from the 60s and the 70s coming into the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say for myself, my first experience with hip hop and Islam was the 5% Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw you had one of our dear brothers of explaining the connection. But
Yes.
it was probably, for me anyway, coming up in the mid 80s when I heard Chuck D.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck D said, Farrakhan's a prophet, and I think you ought to listen to. What are you going to say to you?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what that did for me was trigger in my mind that I needed to go find out who this man was. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, Jesse Jackson had been running for the presidency, 84, right? And there was a spirit amongst black people to do for self, to get up and empower ourselves once again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the voice of Minister Farrakhan resonated, brother, throughout the 80s, right there. Not only Chuck D, you had Big Daddy Kane, you had Poor Righteous Teachers, you had Just Ice. That's going back when he was talking
Yeah.
about Latoya.
Yep.
But, Just Ice was justice, Allah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as young people, in 85, I was like 17, going on 18, and that was the thing. It wasn't the bling bling so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were still wearing Black Power medallions with the Africa symbol, right?
Yep. Yep.
And the influence of Islam, I would say, was most heavy because of two factors. And one being the five percenters, who, of course, were youth and young people in the midst of the genre growing up of hip hop, and also the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan being a father figure for
Mm-hmm.
many of us in leading us in that conscious movement.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, as far as speaking of the five percenters, um Clarence 13 actually became known as Allah Father. He left Temple number 7 and founded the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. Is that the way that the lessons and the teachings from the Nation of Islam ended up into the hip hop culture? Is that, would you say that's an accurate depiction of how it happened? For this.
I would say to meet Brother Akbar Muhammad
Mhm.
and Brother Minister Akbar is actually the international representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Okay.
But he actually knew Clarence 13X Smith, and he definitely gave those accounts
Hmm.
of him taking the lessons from the mosque at that time called the Temple and bringing them into the streets for our young people
Hmm.
to have that experience. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. And one question that I always wanted to ask is, was there any kind of controversy? Because the stuff that the Nation of Islam is giving, a lot of it is very esoteric. It's deep. It's very, very profound. Was there any controversy because Allah was giving these lessons to people? Did anybody say, "Hold on, people ain't ready for this," or "We got to hold it back from the masses. They're not prepared for it," or was it one of those things where it happened and everybody was on board with it?
I'm sure that there was some controversy. Whenever there is change that is happening, many a times it is housed in controversy.
Mm-hmm.
And the brother leaving the mosque is not something that is protocol in terms of propagating the faith. And so, yes, there was some controversy with brother Clarence 13X leaving the mosque, and I'm sure there was probably some tension around him distributing the lessons to the young people.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the 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 means, right? Many a times justify the ends. And so, look for myself, right? I would not have known about the nation if it wasn't for the 5%ers.
Right.
I would not have known about these teachings had it not been for listening to hip hop and then having that infusion of the lessons in the music.
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. And so all things work for the good, and
Right.
I think that Allah God definitely had His hands on that. Um, to this day, I'm just thankful to have grown up, during the hip hop heyday
Mm-hmm.
and having the opportunity to experience that.
Gotcha. One thing that just occurred to me, if I recall correctly, I think I read somewhere that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad had a restriction on music in the Nation of Islam at one point in time. But then, if I recall correctly, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan actually used music as a teaching tool. He came up with that song "Heed the Call," and I was that when the restriction was kind of lifted a little bit because music was being used as a tool to teach, or am I off on that?
Well, I will say this: you have done your research, and I can only tell you what we have been told and taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan,
Mm-hmm.
and that is that during the time of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when the minister was young, and he was an entertainer, singing, playing instruments, and very good at it,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of potential to be successful. And what he tells is that he was actually in a restaurant, and one of the other brothers came to him and told him that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had given an instruction for those who are in the entertainment industry, to get out of the industry, to get out of, entertainment and music and so forth, um, and that they had to make a choice. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that he made that choice. He made the choice to stay with his teacher. He made the choice to stay with the nation. He made the choice to stay with the resurrection of our people. Um, and we're glad he did.
Right, right, absolutely, and we all benefited from that decision, definitely.
Yes, indeed.
And it's also a major blessing that the teachings and the lessons are now in the music and a part of the music. Because I remember being young, and I tell this story all the time. When Wu-Tang Clan came out with the song "Garment Renaissance," and the RZA was had a part of the song.
Okay.
The RZA had a part in the song when he was talking about a dude who was savage and he was eating the wrong foods, and RZA was breaking down the food that he was eating and how it was bad for him. He was breaking it down to chemicals. And there was one part where he
Mm,
said, there's one part where he said the brother was eating too much monosodium glutamate. And I remember my older brother every day would send me to the store, be like, Dad, go to the store, bring me some chips, bring me a Philly, and bring me some juice. And then one day he sent me to the store and I was like, I know what you want. He's like, nah, don't bring me no chips. I think you got too much monosodium glutamate, Dev. He said, bring me some apples, bring me some orange juice. And of course, he still wanted the Philly, but at least he was trying to eat the live. I was like, that's powerful that hip hop was teaching. Like, I haven't eaten pork. I haven't eaten pork in like 15 years. Not because I'm a
yes,
Muslim,
indeed.
but just because I grew up in a hip hop culture. So those lessons
Yeah,
and those teachings influenced me. Like I would probably be dead if I eating all that red meat and eating the way I was eating. So just the teachings in the music was a beautiful thing to me. I'm always gonna give respect to the Nation of Islam, the Nation of Gods and Earths, because y'all really kept a lot of us alive. We may not have listened to everything, but the little bit we took in let us live a little longer.
yeah, yeah, brother. Again, when we talk about the resurrection of our people, it can't happen fast enough. Uh, the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan speaking about hip hop, and he said these words that one hip hop song, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, was worth 1,000 lectures.
Wow.
All right.
Hmm.
And so think about that, brother.
Hmm.
Think about how fast words are moving. Think about the beat and the combination of lyrics being able to get into not just your conscious, but your subconscious.
Right.
Think about, young people who can remember these songs and these lyrics both frontwards and backwards. All
Hmm.
right. Many a time saying better than the actual artists themselves.
Right.
And so, when you add that degree of knowledge of self into music, there's really no measure in terms of what it could do to not only a person, not even to a people, but to an entire nation and to the world.
Hmm. Hmm. And you mentioned that there's people trying to keep Islam out of the hands of the youth.
Yes.
I was reading an article in the source years ago that was saying that we started to see a decline in the mention of Allah around 9/11. They said
Mm,
the article said that a lot of artists were afraid to mention Islam and afraid to mention Allah because they were afraid that after 9/11 there will be a decline in their record sales. Do you see that there's any
mm.
truth to that, or do you think there was something else that there's more to the story?
That's a good question, brother, and I can't really say that I've heard much on that. It's so funny that we are just a few days from 9/11, and I do remember, of course, where I was during 9/11. I remember the tension in the atmosphere. There were many Muslims who were persecuted, prosecuted as a result of what happened in 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And you know for me, if you're an artist, if you're true to your music, right, and if you're conscious, you're not going to let something like 9/11 stop you
Right.
from speaking about Allah. If anything, you're going to speak about Allah even more,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to put more of the knowledge into your music and into your lyrics. But there are those, right, who are controlled by the powers that be, controlled by the record company, but controlled by the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, you know, um, many years after 9/11, they're still afraid to speak the truth,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And, artists, as we have seen as of late, those who speak the truth, right, are faced with opposition and oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're just looking for the new lyricists,
Right.
right, that will be bold enough to speak truth to power. Yeah.
Right. Um. So, well, you said so much. My mind is going in a whole hundred different directions at once. But what I want to ask, you said the powers that be. Who would benefit, or
Yes.
who would even want to keep knowledge out of the music? Who would benefit from that? Who are these powers that be behind the scene?
Brother, man, you got some good questions. But what I would say to those listening, and if you have not, read or heard of the Willie Lynch letter, then I suggest that those who are under the sound of my voice go and find a copy of the Willie Lynch letter, research it on uh, the internet and so forth, because you will find that during the 1700s, when this gentleman supposedly made this speech, Willie Lynch, he gave a formula. And that formula, he said, if implemented correctly, would keep our people separated. Because, of course, he was talking about a strategy on how to control slaves better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say to you, Brother Devin, that the same powers that be that benefited from slavery in the 1700s are still benefiting from the modern day slavery in 2023, whether it be the prison industrial complex or the school to prison complex, whether it be the food industry, the music industry, the health industry, big pharma. These are the powers that be. And of course, the crown of all of them is the government themselves. And so, it is important that we understand who those powers are and how they still benefit today.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, and you're 100% right because if you think about it, all the different agencies that you mentioned the food industry, medical industry. If people listen to what the Nation of Islam is saying and ate to live, how much money would they lose? If we listen to what the nation says and did for self, how much money would they
Yes,
lose? If we listen to the
yes,
Nation of Islam, how much power would they lose? So
yes.
they're definitely gonna see the Nation of Islam as opposition, and they're gonna try to keep that out of the music to the best of their ability. You're 100% correct.
I would also add, brother, in terms of them losing money, how much money would we gain as a people?
Yeah.
How much money would we gain as a community, if we took our dollars out of their kitchen, if we took our dollars from their clothing store, if we took our dollars out of their schools and out of their hospitals and did for ourselves
Hold on, I lost the sound, brother.
we have been instructed through the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Oh, can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Can
Yep,
you
it
hear
came
me?
back. It came back. I hear you.
All right, here we go. We must be getting too hot up in here, brother.
Yeah, yeah. Dropping them bombs.
But no, I was saying that, what kind of power would we have if we took our monies out of their kitchen, took our dollars out of their clothing stores, out of their shoe stores, if we took our dollars that we have in our pockets as a collective,
Mhm,
right? If our actors and our singers, if our sports stars were to bring that money back home, it would be such a gain for our people.
mhm,
We haven't even been able to see that kind of reality. And so when we listen to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he is consistently giving us that clarion call for
mhm,
unity. And that unity, as we heard Chuck D say, and he got it from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our unity, brother, is more powerful than an atom bomb.
mhm. True indeed. True indeed. And we really got to take a moment to give the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan due respect because if you look at the history of the Nation of Islam, he brought the Nation of Islam back. After Ward Houdin
Yes, sir.
Muhammad shut it down, he brought it back. And he's also responsible for bringing back a slow but powerful resurgence of Islam in hip hop. Even though they tried to keep it out, he's bringing it back. Because if you look at him, who do you see him with now? You see him with a lot of hip hop artists. A lot of
True.
hip hop artists are going to him. Kanye West is going to him. I've heard stories of Busta Rhymes meeting him. Busta Rhymes said he cried his eyes out. He could barely even withstand the radiance of the minister. So the minister
Yes,
deserves
indeed.
so much respect because he's bringing righteousness back to hip hop. As he's trying to bring it back into hip hop, um, do you think that people are going to be receptive this time? Since we lost it out of mainstream hip hop, he's trying to put it back in mainstream. Are the people going to be receptive or are they going to still be struggling and going for that ignorance?
That's a very powerful question, brother. And I will say these words that I heard the minister say, that this generation that we have today is the most powerful generation that we have ever produced. And they are the most powerful generation because they are fearless. And so even though the powers that be continue to create a negative environment for the youth that are growing up, they continue to feed them this low grade music with low grade videos that's attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
low grade expressions of thought that really fall down to the level of demonic.
Right.
They can't stop the rise of our people.
Mm-hmm.
This is why Chuck D said it takes a nation of millions to hold us back, brother. But the sleeping giant is awakening. And every day in some corner of America, in some corner around the world, there's a young person who is being exposed to these teachings. Even though the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is 90 years young, brother,
Mm-hmm.
all right? Still, his voice resonates throughout our community. And so I would say that they really don't have a choice, and it's not even so much are they accepting Islam, but are they accepting the truth? Are they accepting peace? If you just do a general census, if you will, or survey of random people, you
Mm-hmm.
will find that people want peace, brother. Here we are in Hartford, Connecticut. Still, our murder rate is the highest in New England. We continue to have a homicide rate that is pushing each year higher and higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's another brother lost, another woman lost, another child lost. There's a video that came out in 2020, and you can Google this, family, and it says that 200 rappers were killed in 2020.
Wow.
Now, brother Devin, what other industry could lose 200 participants and you don't hear anything about it?
None.
I mean, could
None.
you imagine if 200 gospel singers was lost, 200 country western singers, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
only when it's our people and our young people especially, 200 were lost. Yeah, make sure you look that up. 200
Mm-hmm.
rappers lost in 2020.
Wow. Um,
So it's really about accepting the truth, brother. A lot of people get caught up with the labels, and there was always, if you will, this thing between the Muslims, right, and the Christians. And what I do today at every chance I get is to explain some words that the minister said. He said that a good Muslim is a good Christian, and that a good Christian is a good Muslim.
mm-hmm.
And so all of this confusion has to do with an enemy that has slipped in and tried to keep brother from brother and sister from sister. But I believe hip hop can be one of the vehicles that can open the eyes of our young people and stop what the minister described as this fratricide,
Mm-hmm.
where family is killing family in our own community. So accept Islam, well, accept peace. And when they accept peace, they can accept love and accept brotherhood.
Gotcha. Gotcha. A controversial question that I often ask myself is because hip hop is so powerful, because it's being taken in a negative direction and being used as a tool, should we have a certain level of censorship on these artists? Should artists be banned from saying certain things and talking about certain things? Of course, I'm an artist myself. I make hip hop music. I want to be free to say what I want. But at the same time, I understand that when they talk about gangster rap, NWA was like the first real big gangster rap group. And when they came and dropped their album, they said there was gangs in LA. But after they dropped
Mm.
their music, the gang violence exploded. So we know how powerful hip hop music is. Should certain artists who promote that be censored, or is there another way?
What I would say in terms of censorship, brother, you know, you have right to freedom of speech. However, we have to be careful because words are powerful and words can change reality for the best, positive, or for the worst, negative. Keep in mind that every hip hop record, although you may have some indie labels out here, but the major artists are distributed on these major labels. And so while the artist, we hear those lyrics coming out of his or her mouth, the question is who is distributing it? Who gave it the stamp of approval? And now we're starting to hear artists say things like, well, we get paid more the more destructive our lyrics are.
Right.
They want us to be able to put this negativity out there. And again, the powers that be, who's behind it, who
Mhm.
benefits from it. take a look at the systemic systems that are out there that are based on racism, brother, as you know,
Oh yeah, of course,
part
absolutely.
of it. But they benefit from having prisons filled. They benefit, right? When we have to use our insurance money over and over, going to hospitals and plugging up bullet holes.
Hmm.
They benefit when brother kills brother. So it's high time that, yes, we need to hold accountable the artist for what he or she is saying and putting out on the airwaves. But even more, we need to look at these big companies who are distributing this, not just through America, but throughout the world.
Right. How can we hold the record labels accountable? What can we
You
do
know,
to
one of
get?
the things,
One second.
yep, I would say one of the things that we need to do is distribute our own music.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm.
And with the power of the internet, right? You know, we can do things today that we couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago. And now, hip hop is 50 years. What's going to happen in the next 50 years? Maybe there could be a reality where we won't need this big company or that big company to distribute our music to our people. We can distribute our own music, come up with our own channels. Then we can be accountable for what is said and use the airwaves as a means of resurrecting our people. That's really what it's all about.
Yep, yep. And that reminds me of one of the most profound teachings I heard from the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. It's so simple, but I think about it every day. He said, "Build your own and rule yourself."
Yes, accept your own and be
Hmm.
yourself. Yes,
Yep.
indeed.
There you go. There you go.
Yes, so simple, brother.
So simple, but
But
so real.
I will say this: it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
But if we continue to find avenues and platforms where we can do what you're doing right here and putting this positive out across the airwaves, then young people will resonate towards the positive. The
Very
Honorable
true.
Minister Louis Farrakhan said, no matter how much wickedness, and I'm paraphrasing, no matter how much wickedness we have done,
Hmm.
our nature is righteousness. Our nature is to be right.
Hmm.
For we were created in the image and likeness of God. So our nature, our very nature, is the nature of good and Godhood.
That's powerful. It's very powerful. Um, what do you think is like the central concept or the central quote or the central idea from what you learned in the Nation of Islam that you think, okay, that's right there. That's the one right there that needs to be in hip hop, and that's gonna rapidly change the way everybody thinks so we can move forward. Is there your favorite quote that you think is just this is the one?
That there's so many.
I
I
know.
mean,
I mean,
but
the
one,
Nation of Islam been around since the 1930s, so it's a
yes,
lot.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will say this though, and I'm going to use it, dear brother, kind of as a PSA,
Mhm.
because last Sunday I did part one of our Sunday teaching that was entitled "The Power of God in You,"
Mhm.
and this week we'll do part two.
Okay.
And so, if there's any central theme, that is knowledge of self will awaken the God in you.
As someone using that terminology, do you notice that sometimes people are scared of that? Like we have a lot of us is raised as Christian. We still have a lot of Christians in the community. So when you think
Yes.
when they think of God, they're like God is up there, I'm down here. Do people get scared when you talk about the power of God in us?
You know, there is a certain degree of fear, I'm sure, because it's fear of the unknown. Most of
I
us don't
never thought about that.
understand.
Yeah, I never thought
Yeah.
about that.
Most of us don't understand that the Christianity that we have today comes directly from the plantation.
Yep.
and that it was overseen by the so-called slave master, and they made sure that what was given to the slave was not a liberating thought, but a thought that would make the slave a better slave and more submissive to his so-called master. And so Christianity, in its purest form, can be liberating if we just understood. The scripture says that the kingdom of heaven is in you.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus speaking, I and the Father are one. And so there are messages within the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, that attest to what is being taught in the nation of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, as the Quran says, that God is closer to you than your jugular vein.
That's very true. And that's one of the things that that's one of the things that I've been studying over the years. I know that the term God, we use that term sparingly, but if you read the Bible, that term El or Elohim is used a lot. God even tells Moses,
Correct.
he says, God tells Moses, I will make you a God unto Aaron. So that term God is
That's
used a lot, but they like you said, they covered it up and they buried it or they just ignore it. But that term God is all
yes, sir.
throughout the Bible and it's applied to us a lot.
Yeah, it was beneficial again to the powers that be to keep the slave looking up into the sky
Mm-hmm.
for a mystery God and a mystery heaven, while the slave master and his family got heaven right down here on earth
Mm-hmm.
for over 300 years under the system of chattel slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to take a step back and get a true knowledge of self, knowledge of God, and a knowledge of the enemy of God.
Very true. What is it about the teachings of the Nation of Islam and what the minister brings that made the nation and the minister last for so long? Because I mean, you look at the history of the Nation of Islam from day one. I looked at the FBI files. I looked at the CIA files. From day one, they were sending in spies. They were sending in agents. They was trying to take the nation down from day one. They tried to arrest Master Farad Muhammad. They made up lies about
Yes,
him. Then they did the same thing with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And they did the same
yes,
thing with the honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. They did the same thing with Malcolm X. They tried to lie. They tried to murder. They tried everything they could. But the nation just keeps on
yes, sir.
going. What makes a nation so powerful?
I think in one word, dear brother, it would have to be truth. Truth. And when you live in a world that is based on falsehood, then truth is truly a weapon. Truth is something that is despised by those who continue to benefit from our ignorance and from the falsehood that has been added to everything and every fiber of this world. And so the minister represents that truth. The nation represents that truth.
Right.
In 1995, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan called the Nation of Islam and Black men from around the world to come to Washington, D.C. for the Million Man March, the majority of the men who came were Christians.
Wow.
And so that solidified in time that the Nation of Islam is the nation of peace. For we didn't have one incident, dear brother, on that mall.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, and I say, go do some research, dear family. We didn't just get a million, we almost got 2 million Black men.
Mm-hmm.
A historic event that has never happened
Mm-hmm.
in the annals of history. And I would say, once again, talking about the correlation between the Bible and the current time that we live in, it was an exodus for us.
Mm-hmm.
It was very akin to what Moses did, going to Pharaoh and telling him, let my people go. and then the children of Israel gathering up their belongings and going to the Red Sea. And so we have to be able to see in the scripture not only what they call history, but what we have to see as prophecy. We came back from the Million Man March fired up, brother.
Mm-hmm.
But the enemy also was fired up.
You're right.
And they said, oh, we cannot have this.
Yeah, it's only gonna
And
get bigger and bigger.
from the Million Man March, you had the Million Woman March and the Million Children's March and the Million Family March and so forth. And as a matter of fact, dear brother, we'll be celebrating in October. And I pray maybe we can come back and talk to your listeners. We want to open our doors here in Hartford and celebrate the anniversary of the Million Man March and the Holy Day of Atonement right here in Hartford, Connecticut.
All right. All
That'll
right.
be mid-October.
That's
Mhm.
beautiful. Absolutely. Um,
Yes, sir.
changing gears a little bit. The minister oftentimes has spoken of something that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad spoke of, which is what they call UFOs, the mother wheel, the mother plane. For a very long time, there were people who were doubting. Now, even the U.S. government has to acknowledge. Even now, they have to acknowledge. And this is something that the hip hop community has also supported and believed in as well. Nas had a line, I come from the wheel of Ezekiel. There was
Mm.
a hip hop group called the Grave Diggers, and they were 5%ers. And they had a line where somebody said, I came on the scene from the wheel that Ezekiel seen. So hip hop has been talking about that wheel. Can you give us a little insight on the connection between the wheel, what's happening now, what's going to happen, and what you've seen or noticed in hip hop? A lot of underground hip hop has been talking about this for a little while.
Yes, sir. And I have to preface that with an invite for our listeners to come out and get the details on Sundays at 11 a.m. at 2550 Main Street here in Hartford, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going back to the early teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad in that immaculate book, Message to the Black Man, you get the first understanding, if you will, of the mother plane. And as you have said, really every government other than America, brother, America has just gotten to the point where she wants to release her files
Mm-hmm.
about, what they call UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't call them UFOs, for we know that they are identified
Right.
as the baby wheels or the baby planes.
Okay.
And this is, as we are taught in the nation, the weapon of God. And so people want to do their research now, and
Yep.
there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there, dear brother.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very interesting today that you can actually get on the internet and look up the black aliens, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can look up the historic context of, again, what they call UFOs throughout our history. And keeping in mind that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said that we are the original people of the planet, the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been on the planet long enough to understand and know exactly what these, again, unidentified flying objects are. The minister even tells us of his experience with the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I, I'm not going to go too deep into it, dear brother, but
Right. I understand.
again, I'm going to invite folks out to come and hear the teaching, and we'll go deeper into uh, what the wheels are, why they were created, all right, and what this government fears about the wheels
Gotcha.
and the
Gotcha.
connection. And I would say, lastly, the connection with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Gotcha, gotcha. And yeah, anybody who watches this definitely stop by the mosque, get the full story, get the full information. Because a lot of what I say, a lot of what I say in research, I'll study with the Nation of Islam first, and everybody else is just catching up. Like the stuff that the Nation of Islam was saying back in the 30s and the 40s and 50s and 60s, everybody else is just catching up now. So, make sure y'all go down to the mosque and get that good word. Absolutely.
It's a blessing, like I said, that falsehood is having a really hard time. They
Right.
have had to step their game up, brother.
Mm-hmm.
There are platforms, that have banned the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan from being on their platforms.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone to that extreme of censorship to try to stop the voice of truth. But try as they may, brother, it's not going to happen.
Right. Right. How do you, and this is a personal question, how do you deal with the constant attacks on Islam and the Nation of Islam? Like, for instance, you mentioned the Million Man March. You said it was 95. I was 15 in 95. And I remember specifically seeing all those people. And then the white news media would say, oh, it wasn't that many people. They didn't get a
Mm,
million. And I'm looking right at the picture on the
yeah.
news. And this is obviously more than a million people, but they want to lie so bad on y'all. They was like, it was a few thousand, obviously lying. They say the Nation of Islam did heinous things and that y'all responsible for all kinds of wickedness. How do you handle that when you know you a good person trying to do good in the community? I've seen you. You boots on the ground. I see you in the community doing nothing but positivity. The Nation of Islam do nothing but positivity. And then you got people constantly saying, oh, y'all killed Malcolm X, or y'all did this, or the most honorable Elijah Muhammad did that. How do you personally deal with that much negativity and keep your glow? Because you always got that positive energy, brother.
All praise is due to Allah, dear brother. I would have to say, in one word, um, prayer, so that you don't become too overwhelmed in an atmosphere that surrounds you with negativity. And then the practice of study. And then I would add a third leg to that and say work. And so prayer, study, and work keeps you active, keeps you young.
Mm-hmm.
It's like going to the gym. There's not a boxer out there that's going to get into the ring to fight a professional fight and not have gone to the gym, not have sparred, not have practiced the technique. You have to practice every day. Some days you practice harder than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some days are good days. Some days are not so good days. But all the praise is due to Allah. And then what we say here in Hartford is that you got to take your F pill. And the F pill is the Farrakhan pill. And brother, the minister has spoken on every aspect of human life in
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can't find an answer, motivation, inspiration to in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship problem, put in Farrakhan in relationship.
Yep. And not to cut you off, you know what? I've done that because my father passed away when I was 21, so my dad wasn't there to
Yes,
ask advice. So I would literally go to the minister on YouTube. I would type in Minister Farrakhan speaks on marriage issues. Minister
that's
Farrakhan. When I started my own business, I was Minister
right.
Farrakhan speaks on starting your own business. Whatever it
That's
was, I would type it
that's
in,
right.
and there was always a video.
Yes, yes, yes. So, our young people today, you know, are truly influenced by social media, truly influenced, by the abundance of screen time and watching different things on the internet. Well, I would suggest watch the minister,
So,
find out more about the Nation of Islam. A lot of young people don't even realize that you could join the Nation of Islam, all right, at 16, dear brother.
mhm.
Imagine. what would happen if young people started to join the Nation of Islam at 16, 17, and 18 years of age. And 10 years later, now they're 26, 27, 28. That's 10 years of development. Instead, they join street organizations. Instead, they're out here running the streets. Instead, they get caught up in violence. And so when you get this knowledge of self, it can change your entire life. That's really the goal and aspiration for me, brother. And I'll tell you that, not just myself, but many of us, we're tired of burying our young people. You know, we're tired of going to funerals for teenagers and babies. We're tired of seeing our young men kill our young men in the streets of not only this city, but around America.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, a lot of folks, oh, I don't want to be a Muslim. Don't worry about being a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Just be yourself.
Right.
Huh?
Right.
Just be yourself. Come and get the knowledge and see what happens. So that's really what it is. Get the knowledge, see what happens.
That's beautiful. Last question. What do you think is going to be the future of hip hop music? What's going to keep it going and what's going to bring it back to righteousness?
I think, in my honest opinion, brother, it will be hip hop looking at itself. It will be hip hop looking back over this 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just 6 years ahead of hip hop, you know, and I have seen a lot
Hold
of
on.
change.
Brother, you 56?
Yes, sir.
Yo, you look amazing.
Oh,
You look amazing. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, man, you look old, Dad. I'm looking at brother Lovejoy, like, bro, you look great.
oh, God is
I'm
great,
like, hitting the
brother.
gym again, man. Damn.
But honestly, brother, I think it's when hip hop reflects. I think it's when the elders of hip hop start to come together, right? Those who are now in their 40s and 50s and 60s, right? Who are pioneers, and they come together and start to decide where hip hop is going to go in the future, and not just let the powers that be, not let the culture vultures continue to feed on our people,
Right.
feed off of our talent,
Yep.
and put out this garbage.
Right.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but there's a difference between hip hop and rap music. Huh? And what the enemy has done is broke down the culture of hip hop so that our young rappers today don't even know what hip hop is. They just want to give us rap. And
Mm-hmm.
really, I see if you add a C to it, you would know exactly what it is. It ain't rap, brother. It's
Yep.
just crap.
Yep. Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
brother Lovejoy, we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much for your time, brother. I thank you so much for your knowledge and your wisdom. And hopefully we can link up and do this again, man. And when I'm done with the project, the Islamic Orders of Hip Hop, I'll make sure you get a free copy of the book when it's published, brother.
Oh, well, I definitely appreciate that, brother. And again, to you and your listeners, I extend a warm and heartfelt invitation to come and see us every Sunday at 2550 Main Street, Hartford, Connecticut. Doors open at 10:30, 11 a.m. sharp. May God continue to bless you, brother. I thank you once again. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sir. Peace, brother Lovejoy.
Peace, brother.